The woman put on a sexy nightgown and went to the hotel early to decorate the room. However, after she took a shower, her husband told her to go home and sleep. He had even called a taxi for her. Although the woman was very disappointed, she still obeyed her husband's arrangement. Although the husband claimed that a subordinate was coming to report work, the woman knew very well that her husband didn't want to be with her at all and kept urging her to get dressed and leave quickly. The flustered woman accidentally fell onto the bed. The man looked disgusted at the sight and went forward to zip up her clothes for her before urging his wife to leave again. After the woman returned home, she watched the videos they had taken in the past with tears in her eyes, recalling the time when she and her husband were deeply in love. But now, the two of them could never go back to the happiness they had before. The woman's name was Xiaoen. She was a full-time housewife who had married into a wealthy family. Her husband, the president of a group, had been living in a hotel all year round and paid no attention to his wife Xiaoen. As a result, Xiaoen had to go to the hotel especially if she wanted to get intimate with her husband. Being the daughter-in-law of a wealthy family might seem glamorous to others, but for Xiaoen, it was just a cold and heartless cage. The next day, the restaurant run by Xiaoen's father opened. Her old father, who was unaware of the situation, kept showing off that his daughter had married into a good family, not knowing that his daughter was not liked by her in-laws at all. When Xiaoen went to the airport to pick up her mother-in-law, she happened to see her mother-in-law being interviewed by reporters. When the reporters noticed the daughter-in-law Xiaoen, they quickly went forward to prepare to interview her about her mother-in-law. But Xiaoen was so nervous that she didn't know how to describe it. The mother-in-law quickly said that it was probably because her daughter-in-law was making her first public appearance and might be a bit nervous. Then the reporters continued to ask Xiaoen if her mother-in-law was usually kind. Xiaoen quickly explained that her mother-in-law was very amiable at home. But the reporters said that this answer was too perfunctory. After the interview, the mother-in-law immediately pulled a long face and scolded Xiaoen, feeling that her daughter-in-law's answer had made her lose face. The innocent Xiaoen still didn't know what she had done wrong. Meanwhile, the secretary said that when answering the reporters' questions, she shouldn't have looked up at the madam, as it was easy for the reporters to make speculations and create a big fuss out of it. Xiaoen quickly apologized to her mother-in-law, but the mother-in-law suddenly asked the driver to stop the car. Xiaoen begged her mother-in-law not to leave her there because it was impossible to get a taxi there. But in the end, Xiaoen was still mercilessly left on the highway. After walking for dozens of kilometers, Xiaoen finally saw a bus stop and was lucky enough to catch the last bus. Looking at her heels that had been rubbed raw, a handsome guy next to her kindly handed her a band-aid. At this time, Xiaoen didn't know that she had a deep connection with this handsome guy in front of her. After going through a lot of hardships, Xiaoen finally returned home, only to be greeted by her mother-in-law's scolding. When the mother-in-law learned that her daughter-in-law had come back by bus, she began to taunt and ridicule her, saying that even though she was dressed in designer clothes and accessories, she still couldn't hide her original poor appearance. Moreover, the mother-in-law urged Xiaoen to get pregnant quickly. Although Xiaoen was very aggrieved, she had no choice but to obey her mother-in-law's arrangement. That night, she took the initiative to go to the hotel to find her husband. When she saw the man enter the room, she quickly took off her clothes and lay on the bed. But when the man saw his wife, a look of disgust flashed across his face. Facing his wife's attempts to please him, the man remained silent, just staring at her with a blank look in his eyes. It turned out that he had already warned Xiaoen not to come to the hotel to disturb him easily. But facing her mother-in-law's constant urging to have a baby, Xiaoen really had no other choice but to come to the hotel shamelessly. After being driven out by her husband, Xiaoen left dejectedly by elevator. At this time, when her mother-in-law called to question her, Xiaoen hurriedly claimed that she was with her husband. The man in the elevator with her could tell that she was lying at once. It turned out that he was the handsome guy who had handed her the band-aid on the bus. The next day, after finishing her volunteer work, Xiaoen returned home and was told by her mother-in-law that she would take her out to meet a guest later. Just as Xiaoen was about to ask where they were going, the mother-in-law ignored her and directly asked the assistant to prepare clothes for her. Because Xiaoen's appearance and dress when going out all depended on how to set off her mother-in-law. The assistant emphasized that Xiaoen should talk less when going out and always pay attention to the expression on the madam's face, and never let the other party notice her fear of the mother-in-law. Because the wealthy lady they were going to visit this time was of a very noble status. The wealthy lady kept chatting with Xiaoen and praised her for being well-educated, which made the mother-in-law next to her look very uncomfortable. Then the lady asked Xiaoen if she must be very sad that her husband didn't live at home. It turned out that the reason why Xiaoen's husband lived in the hotel was that the old chairman was seriously ill and hospitalized. So Xiaoen's husband had to take on all the affairs of the company. During the conversation, the mother-in-law was on tenterhooks all the time. However, Shoen's performance throughout the process was highly praised by the noble lady. After hearing this, the mother-in-law also had to follow suit and praise her daughter-in-law for being virtuous. But the mother-in-law's praise made Shoen feel creepy. Later, something happened suddenly at Shoen's natal family. She asked her mother-in-law to go back first. Looking at her daughter-in-law's hurried figure, the mother-in-law immediately asked the assistant to investigate what had happened at the in-laws' place. It turned out that Shoen's elder brother, who wasn't married yet, had brought a son back home. Her old father was extremely angry when he learned about it. However, when Shoen learned that her husband had returned home, she excitedly rushed back to her husband's family. Unexpectedly, by this time, the mother-in-law had already found out about her brother's situation. The kind-hearted Shoen then learned that her mother-in-law had secretly sent people to investigate her. Moreover, the mother-in-law unceremoniously ordered Shoen not to go back to her natal family again because she would never allow her daughter-in-law to be associated with any scandal. This made Shoen feel extremely aggrieved. But fortunately, the husband she had been longing for had returned because she hadn't seen him at home for a long time. But when the husband also learned about her brother's situation, instead of comforting his wife, he accused her brother of being a scumbag, saying that a child raised in such a family would never do anything good. Shoen couldn't bear to listen anymore and questioned her husband whether he had ever had a meal with her brother. Because usually when they met, he wouldn't say a word and always looked as if he had seen a troublemaker. So Shoen felt that her husband had no right to accuse her here. Heartbroken, she could only relieve her mood by chewing on ice cubes. And the husband, who had used the excuse of going out for work, actually showed up at his female secretary's home late at night. But Shoen still took the initiative to write an apology note to her husband, trying to please him and beg for his forgiveness in this humble way. However, such notes had already made the husband numb. Shoen, as usual, brought tea and water for her husband. This time, what she brought for him was a dose of Chinese medicine because having a baby was the first task given to her by her mother-in-law. But her husband was still as cold as ever to her. It turned out that they had a child named Xiajun before, but he had passed away 5 years ago. Shoen would go to the room to see him every day and also fantasize about other children at school as Xiajun. Afraid of quarreling with her husband again, Shoen quickly changed the topic and then turned around with a bitter smile and fled the room. But the husband's next move completely broke Shoen down. The husband cleared out all the things that their son had left before. Shoen saw this and quickly went forward to stop him, begging him not to take away their son's things because she regarded each and everything of her son as her life. But this move only angered the husband even more, and he actually smashed the ceramic that their son liked the most. Shoen watched the broken ceramic scattered on the floor and burst into tears. Then the husband called someone to clear out all the things. The next day, when Shoen was tidying up the room and looking at the happy photos of her and her husband in the past, she recalled what her husband had said to her yesterday. She felt that she should also let go of the past memories. Then she took a photo of the two of them and sent it to her husband, promising that she would live in the present well from now on. But she didn't know that at this time, her mother-in-law no longer wanted her as a daughter-in-law. Because the mother-in-law had gone to a fortune teller who said that her daughter-in-law's fate didn't include the blessing of having children and grandchildren. That night, after drinking until he was unconscious, the husband came home and lay on the bed. Although he had drunk because of work, the mother-in-law still severely scolded Shoen, thinking that she was always causing trouble for her son. Shoen could only lower her head aggrievedly after hearing this. When she saw her husband sleeping soundly, Shoen's mood improved again. So she wanted to help her beloved husband take off his clothes. The next scene was that the mother-in-law accidentally learned that Shoen had early menopause and couldn't have children. This was obviously unacceptable to her. So she first bribed the doctor to hide this matter, and even didn't let her son know about it, because she planned to spread bad rumors about her daughter-in-law and then drive her out of the house. In this way, she could avoid being criticized by public opinion. Of course, all of this had to be assisted by the assistant sacrificing her beauty. Looking at the obedient and sensible daughter-in-law in front of her, the mother-in-law's heart was filled with mixed feelings, but she was also helpless. Then she specially ordered tickets for a concert and asked Shoen to go with her son to relive a romantic date, showing the outside world the illusion of a loving couple. The complacent Shoen never expected that when she pushed the door open that night, she would see such a shocking scene. Shoen's emotions completely collapsed, and she hid alone in the bathroom, crying softly. And all of this was a trap set by the assistant and the mother-in-law, with the purpose of separating the couple's feelings. Shoen looked at the familiar yet strange husband on the bed, and her heart was filled with indescribable pain and sadness. At the same time, the mother-in-law called in a lawyer and the assistant to discuss how to force her daughter-in-law to divorce without losing the face of the company and the family. At this time, the assistant came up with a good idea, which was to find or mislead evidence of Xiuwen's infidelity. The next day, as usual, the assistant criticized Xiuwen's dressing, not knowing that Xiuwen would actually assertively clarify their superior-subordinate relationship and reject the clothes that the assistant had chosen for her. This surprised the mother-in-law as well. Then Xiuwen also took the initiative to ask the assistant to be her driver and send her to the hospital for a physical examination. Although the mother-in-law was shocked, she still allowed it. Wanting to assert her dominance, Xiuwen specially ordered a painting for the assistant and had it directly delivered to the assistant's home. Then she went directly to the assistant's residence in the name of looking at the painting and deliberately put on the assistant's jewelry, looking completely like a mistress, which made the assistant feel very uncomfortable. She didn't expect that Xiuwen would directly point out the scene she had seen last night. Facing Xiuwen's intense condemnation that hit the nail on the head, the assistant didn't seem flustered at all. Instead, she mocked Xiuwen for having no confidence at all. Moreover, since her only son had already passed away, there probably wouldn't be any happiness in her future life. Not only that, the assistant also taunted her, saying that in order to keep her position as the daughter-in-law, she had been bowing and scraping all day long, living a life worse than the dog raised in the Xia family's yard. Then she took out a photo of herself and Xiuwen's husband and boasted that she would be the real mistress of the Xia family in the future. Xiuwen couldn't bear it anymore and directly went forward to fight with the assistant. The next day, looking at the assistant's face full of scratches, the mother-in-law immediately showed a fierce look, pulled up a potted plant by the roots, and said that she would mercilessly get rid of things that were useless to her. The assistant was so scared that she quickly lowered her head to admit her mistake and confessed everything. The mother-in-law was very disappointed with her actions. She ordered the assistant to do everything she could to clear up the misunderstanding in Xiuwen's heart. When the husband learned that his affair with the assistant had been discovered, he pretended to invite his father-in-law and mother-in-law to dinner, hoping that they could help him smooth things over. Facing Xiuwen's questioning, the husband actually claimed that it was just a small matter and even blamed Xiuwen, saying that she shouldn't have seen that scene yesterday. The poor Xiuwen was so angry that she was speechless. And at this time, the mother-in-law had a new plan. She first pretended to fire the assistant, and then Xiuwen also received a text message from the assistant apologizing, claiming that she had already left Seoul. The next day, the mother-in-law found Xiuwen again and said that she had adopted an abandoned baby in the hospital but there was no one to take care of him. She hoped that her daughter-in-law could go to the hospital to help take care of the baby. It turned out that the mother-in-law knew very well that her daughter-in-law liked children very much, so she began to take advantage of this to scheme against Xiuwen. However, when Xiuwen arrived at the hospital, she found that the boy's attending doctor was Amin, who had helped her many times before. After listening to Amin's account, she learned that the boy had a brain tumor and could go into shock and die at any time. At the same time, the husband received a call from his mother, saying that it had been a long time since she had seen him and his wife go out on a date together. Now Xiuwen was just in the adjacent hospital, and she asked her son to go and accompany Xiuwen well. Then when the man arrived at the hospital, he found that his wife was feeding the boy with Amin, and the scene looked just like a family of three. The husband immediately became jealous and felt very uncomfortable inside. After returning home, he asked his mother to find someone else to take care of the boy in the hospital, but his mother directly refused, saying that the boy liked Xiuwen very much and she wouldn't be at ease if it was someone else. The next day, the husband deliberately took Xiuwen to a party. At the dinner table, Xiuwen looked restless. It turned out that today was the day of the boy's surgery in the hospital. After the party ended, Xiuwen received a call from Amin, learning that the boy was still unconscious after the surgery. Just as she was about to go to the hospital, she was directly stopped by her husband. The man questioned her why she was so concerned about this child. Was she his mother? Xiuwen was so angry after hearing this that she directly turned around and left. When she arrived at the hospital and saw the remorseful Amin, Xiuwen quickly went forward to comfort him, telling him not to worry too much. At this time, the husband who had chased after her happened to see this scene. Angry, he grabbed Xiuwen and was about to drag her away from here. Amin was just about to explain when he was directly punched to the ground by the husband. However, the rumor of an affair between Xiuwen and Amin quickly spread throughout the hospital. At this time, the mother-in-law was already overjoyed. After receiving a tip-off from an informant, she quickly rushed to the hospital to put on a show, accusing her daughter-in-law of being a shameless thing. Xiuwen saw this and quickly rushed back home to explain, but unexpectedly, the password of the door lock had already been changed. Feeling helpless, Xiuwen could only sit on the ground and wait bitterly. In the evening, when the husband came home from work and brought Xiuwen in, they saw the mother-in-law standing at the door, spouting nonsense, and telling her son that Xiuwen wanted to go back to her natal family to stay for a few days. Xiuwen just stood there dumbfounded after hearing this. When they returned to the bedroom, they found that the suitcase had already been packed. The husband was angrily thinking that his wife had packed the suitcase without discussing it with him. But Xiao-en could only smile wryly. She finally realized that she had always been trapped in the mother-in-law's schemes. Heartbroken, Xiao-en took her luggage and returned to her natal family early the next morning. The husband saw the neatly arranged clothes on the bed and mistakenly thought that his wife had put them there for him before leaving. But when he went out, his mother directly praised the assistant's taste, saying that it was much better than Xiao-en's. The man heard this and turned around and left helplessly. Amin knew that his appearance had brought trouble to Xiao-en, so he asked Xiao-en to meet him to explain the reason. Unexpectedly, he was secretly photographed by the assistant. After seeing the photo, the husband actually believed it was true. He angrily went to confront the assistant and warned her not to get involved in their family affairs anymore. Actually, in the husband's heart, he still liked Xiao-en. Then the man ignored the obstruction and directly brought his wife back home. Seeing that her scheme had failed, the mother-in-law became furious. She blamed Xiao-en for being an ignorant woman, saying that she had the nerve to come back so soon after just moving out. Actually, the reason why Xiao-en was so submissive was simply to avoid causing her family any more worry. The next day, Xiao-en prepared a sumptuous breakfast. But the mother-in-law said that just because there were many dishes didn't mean it was good. None of the dishes on the table were to her liking. The mother-in-law's scolding made Xiao-en feel extremely aggrieved. Fortunately, in the evening, the husband took the initiative to take Xiao-en to a banquet. However, the man accidentally saw the assistant chatting with Amin. It turned out that the assistant, under the instruction of the mother-in-law, had told Amin about her relationship with Xiao-en's husband, hoping that Amin could save the humble Xiao-en. Then Xiao-en's husband pulled the assistant out of the hall. At this time, the assistant took the opportunity to directly kiss the man forcefully. Coincidentally, Xiao-en also followed closely and walked out. Amin saw that the situation was not good and quickly pulled Xiao-en back into the hall. The assistant then provocatively said that there was another man beside Xiao-en. Sure enough, the jealous man directly deleted all the contacts in Xiao-en's phone and warned her not to meet Amin privately. But Xiao-en had already made it clear that she would no longer be at the mercy of others. Later, Xiao-en found that the abalone her mother had kindly sent was ruthlessly thrown into the trash by the mother-in-law. She was very sad and picked up the abalone. When the mother-in-law came out and saw this, she quickly changed her expression and coaxed her daughter-in-law, explaining that she had accidentally knocked the abalone into the trash and hoped that Xiao-en wouldn't misunderstand her because of this. The mother-in-law's actions made Xiao-en feel terrified. The next day, Xiao-en accompanied the mother-in-law to a charity event. However, the mother-in-law took the opportunity to deliberately bring up the issue of Xiao-en's infertility in front of everyone. Xiao-en's dignity was brutally trampled on by the mother-in-law in public. After the event ended, Xiao-en found the mother-in-law and questioned her why she had done this. Unexpectedly, she was met with the mother-in-law's scathing insults as if each word was stabbing her heart, and the mother-in-law even accused Xiao-en of not having the right to say such things. That day, the mother-in-law deliberately took Xiao-en to a party. When Xiao-en was wearing a business suit, the mother-in-law directly said that she had no taste. After changing into a dress, the mother-in-law accused her of wanting to go on a date. Then Xiao-en changed into a white suit, but the mother-in-law still mocked her, saying that after so many years, she was still so rustic. Finally, she still made her daughter-in-law change back into the first set of clothes. Moreover, after the party ended, the mother-in-law still blamed her daughter-in-law for embarrassing her too much and then got into a luxury car and drove away, leaving the poor daughter-in-law on the roadside again. However, when Xiao-en walked back home, she found that her husband had driven away with the assistant. Xiao-en then realized that everything she had been told before was a lie fabricated by everyone against her. The next day, at the dinner table, Xiao-en deliberately brought up the matter of the assistant. The mother-in-law lied and said that they had had no contact since the assistant resigned. Depressed, Xiao-en asked Amin to meet her to chat. After hearing this, Amin also quickly gave Xiao-en a piece of advice. He advised Xiao-en that if she was not happy at all, there was no need to continue to endure like this. However, on her way home, Xiao-en unexpectedly saw the mother-in-law secretly meeting and talking with the assistant. After seeing this, Xiao-en never expected that everything was being secretly manipulated by the mother-in-law. She found the mother-in-law and frankly asked her why she was always so cold to her. Since she had married into the Xia family for so many years, the mother-in-law had never given her a kind face. The mother-in-law finally told the truth at this time. She said that no daughter-in-law could be like a daughter. You and your family members are all of such despicable character. The mother-in-law's vicious words almost made her suffocate. The next day, Xiao-en sent a text message inviting her husband to go out for dinner. When she arrived at the restaurant, she found the assistant. It turned out that the assistant had also been invited by Xiao-en. After the last person, Xiao-en, sat down, she directly clarified their relationship. However, in the end, both of them admitted everything. But the husband said that he had already cut off all contact with the assistant and it had always been the assistant who was constantly pestering him. But Shoen said that it didn't matter anymore. Finally, she took out a big gift and gave it to the assistant. The arrogant husband was dumbfounded. He didn't expect that his submissive wife could actually take the initiative to propose divorce to him. When the husband returned home, he was suddenly furious, because he would never allow the occurrence of divorce. So he took the initiative to call Shoen's mother. He knew that Shoen's natal family was her biggest weakness. When the phone was connected, the husband asked Shoen to tell her mother about the divorce herself. But Shoen walked away crying. Heartbroken, Shoen was afraid that her mother would worry, so she didn't dare to go back to her natal family. So she went to the mother-in-law's studio, wanting to know the real reason why the mother-in-law had done all these things before she left. The mother-in-law made it clear that since she could no longer carry on the family line for this family, she no longer had the right to stay as her daughter-in-law. Shoen frankly said that since it was like this, why not just say it directly instead of going to such great lengths? The mother-in-law said that she wouldn't be a mean mother-in-law who drove her daughter-in-law away. Shoen was completely awakened this time, because no matter how excellent she was, she could never meet the excessive demands of the mother-in-law. Then Shoen told her husband about every little detail of how she had served the family for more than a decade. After hearing this, the husband couldn't deny it and nodded. He thought that his wife would forget the past and continue to stay by his side. But he didn't expect that this was the last dinner that Shoen would make for him. When the mother-in-law returned home, she found that Shoen hadn't moved out yet. Mistakenly thinking that she was still waiting to ask for alimony from her, she said that as long as Shoen admitted that the reason for the divorce was her own fault, she would definitely not treat Shoen unfairly. But Shoen said that she would only take what she should take and wouldn't ask for an extra cent. Because she was also the daughter who was treasured by her parents and the good mother of her son who was in heaven. So she would never let the wicked humiliate her again. The mother-in-law was furious after hearing this and decided to make Shoen completely despair. But she didn't expect that Shoen would directly take out her phone and play a recording. The mother-in-law was dumbfounded after hearing it and asked Shoen to delete the recording. But she, who had been trampling on others at will, still didn't know that Shoen was no longer the weak and stupid woman she used to be. Frustrated, she could only watch helplessly as Shoen walked away. The next day, she couldn't wait to arrange a blind date for her son. Although the other party had excellent conditions and was the daughter of a well-known entrepreneur, Xiaolu was very disgusted with such an arrangement. So he immediately made it clear that he was still married and wouldn't accept going out with any woman. Because he didn't want to end his marriage and was still hoping to use his father-in-law to force Shoen to come back to him. Unexpectedly, Shoen directly told the truth about her wanting to divorce. Her father also roughly understood the cause of the matter at this time. He looked serious and asked them both to go back first, saying that he needed to be quiet for a while. Sure enough, the next day, her father quickly found his daughter. But instead of supporting her, he asked Shoen to pack her bags and quickly go to the mother-in-law's house to apologize. He said that men would all make such mistakes. Shoen felt helpless in her heart after hearing this. She didn't expect that even her father didn't understand what she was doing. In order to prove that she could live without relying on the wealthy family, she decided to support herself. She successfully found a job. To celebrate starting a new life, she asked Amin to go out shopping with her and watch a movie together. Shoen's mood was finally relieved. However, Xiaolu was in a depressed mood because of the divorce and was drinking alone in a bar. After coming out, he saw his wife chatting and laughing with Amin. His heart immediately felt depressed. So after Shoen left, he directly found Amin and wanted to ask him to give up Shoen. Unexpectedly, before he could finish speaking, he got drunk and fell on Amin. Helpless, Amin had to carry the man back to his home. Seeing that her son had become so haggard, the unwilling mother-in-law called in the assistant again to discuss countermeasures. They decided to use their connections to make things difficult for Shoen. The next day, while Shoen was working in the company, she was suddenly interrupted by the company leader. A good dish was directly ruined by the leader. It turned out that it was the mother-in-law who was secretly instigating all this. She used her connections to meet Shoen's company supervisor and deliberately smeared all of Shoen's past. Then, seeing that her son still had feelings for Shoen, the mother-in-law directly brought up the matter that Shoen could no longer make her hold a grandson. But what Xiaolu said next almost made the mother-in-law faint. Xiaolu said that since their son passed away, he had had the idea of not wanting any more children. So it wasn't Shoen's problem that they hadn't had children in these years. The mother-in-law was speechless in the face of this cruel fact. But she didn't give up torturing Shoen because of this. The next day, she took the assistant to Shoen's natal family and blamed Shoen's mother for not educating her child well. Shoen's mother was heartbroken because of her daughter's situation. After learning about this, Shoen directly went to her home to confront the mother-in-law. Facing Shoen's loud scolding, the mother-in-law wanted to hit her but was directly grabbed by Shoen. At this time, Xiaolu just happened to come home from work. The mother-in-law quickly pretended to be pitiful and asked her son to see how Shoen was treating her. But Shoen didn't care about their opinions at all at this time. She said that she was like this only because they had forced her. After saying that, Shoen turned around and left the house. And the mother-in-law still wanted to hand over the rumor of an affair between Shoen and Amin to the media to hype up. At this time, the man finally couldn't bear it anymore. He said that every time he came home since he was a child, he was always scared. The empty house had no warmth of a family. When his mother wasn't there, he was beaten and scolded by the nanny. So for him, home was just a terrifying memory. But the arrival of Xiaowen had changed all this. She had made the cold house start to have warmth and laughter. It made people want to come home for dinner. But the mother-in-law wasn't awakened by these heart-piercing words. In order to protect his wife from being hurt by his mother, Xiaolu finally agreed to his mother's wish for divorce. At this time, Xiaolu felt that his life was full of sadness. Being in a wealthy family, he couldn't even control his own marriage. And the mother-in-law couldn't wait to take him to a blind date again. And the woman on this blind date gave the mother-in-law a hard time right from the first meeting. She directly found an excuse to drive her away from the dinner table. And when the mother-in-law met a woman with a more superior family background than her own, she immediately lost her usual arrogance and could only go back to her home alone. After the divorce, Xiaowen finally let go of her grudges. Under the meticulous care of Amin, Xiaowen was also moved. Finally, Amin took the opportunity to confess his love to Xiaowen. The two of them started dating openly. And Xiaolu regretted being so cold and heartless to his wife in the past. The mother-in-law, in order to ensure that her son could marry the daughter of a wealthy family smoothly, hurriedly came to find Xiaowen, wanting to get the divorce guarantee letter from her. She wanted Xiaowen to sign an agreement that it was her own responsibility that led to the divorce. But she didn't expect that Xiaowen could be so carefree after the divorce. At the same time, Xiaolu accidentally learned that Amin was the attending doctor who sent their son to the hospital for rescue 5 years ago. It turned out that 5 years ago, Xiaowen's son had a car accident, and Amin was the doctor in charge at that time. Due to a misjudgment, the child died accidentally. And at this time, Xiaowen was still immersed in the sweet love with Amin. The next day, Xiaolu found his ex-wife, wanting to tell her the truth. But seeing Xiaowen's happy appearance now, the man finally couldn't bear to say it out loud. So he asked Amin to meet him alone, threatening him to leave Xiaowen. Amin quickly knelt down on both knees, begging Xiaolu not to tell Xiaowen the truth, because he had finally managed to let go of this matter after 5 years of pain. If it was brought up again, Xiaowen would definitely not be able to bear such a blow. Xiaolu questioned him whether he had known Xiaowen's identity from the beginning and then deliberately got close to her slowly. Amin remained silent after hearing this. In order to avoid causing greater harm to Xiaowen, Xiaolu threatened Amin to leave the country immediately and never appear beside Xiaowen again. The next day, the mother-in-law and the daughter of a wealthy family, Shuya, were discussing their marriage. However, as the main character, Xiaolu was late. The man was extremely regretful about divorcing his ex-wife at this time. He didn't want to talk about this commercial marriage deal in his heart. The mother-in-law was extremely worried at this time, but on the surface, she could only pretend calmly that her son had an important meeting. As a result, they waited for nearly 5 hours. At this time, the mother-in-law couldn't sit still anymore. She called the assistant, but the assistant told her that Xiaolu had gone to meet his ex-wife on the way. The mother-in-law was about to defend her son again when Xiaolu pushed the door open and directly exposed her lie. And he announced seriously that he was canceling this marriage. The mother-in-law was so angry that she almost fainted. A wealthy family's commercial marriage alliance ended unhappily like this. The mother-in-law felt that she had been humiliated like never before. She blamed all of this on Xiaowen. So she ignored the assistant's dissuasion and went to find Xiaowen to settle the score. Coincidentally, she saw Amin teaching Xiaowen to drive. The mother-in-law directly ordered the driver to step on the accelerator to force the other car to stop. When Xiaowen saw the mother-in-law's vicious look, her emotions got out of control. She mistook the accelerator for the brake. Seeing that the car was about to hit the big truck in front, Xiaowen quickly turned the steering wheel. Finally, the car hit the guardrail on the roadside. The mother-in-law saw this and didn't even look back, directly getting into the car and leaving the scene. Amin's arm was seriously injured because of protecting Xiaowen. Although his basic life wouldn't be affected after recovery, he would definitely not be able to perform more precise surgeries in the future. His career as an internal medicine doctor was thus ended. And the mother-in-law was listening to music leisurely at home at this time, not knowing that her son was about to be seriously ill. And the expert who could treat this aspect, Amin, had just been ruined by her. The mother-in-law then lied that she had just happened to be passing by. Such a hypocritical lie even made her son feel ashamed. He suddenly thought that he really didn't deserve his ex-wife Xiaowen. The next day, Xiaolu and his ex-wife had an appointment to visit their deceased son. But Xiaolu almost hit a passerby on the way because of dizziness. Then he felt weak all over, his breathing was rapid, and his body was weak. He directly fainted in the car. It turned out that Xiaolu had a brain tumor, and it was malignant. The doctor advised him to be hospitalized immediately for surgery, otherwise he might not live for more than 6 months. Xiaolu couldn't accept this reality. He resolutely refused the surgery arrangement. Ignoring the doctor's obstruction, he was determined to visit his son. Then he poured out his true feelings in front of his son's tomb and also reflected on his past actions. He wanted to make up for his previous mistakes in the last days of his life. Amin learned about this and quickly persuaded him to have the surgery, claiming that he didn't want Xiaolu to become a memory for Xiaowen. But at this time, Xiaolu's eyes were getting blurrier and blurrier. but he still finally refused to go to the hospital for treatment. Helpless, Amin had to stuff painkillers into Xiaolu's hand because he knew how much pain this disease would cause when it flared up. Finally, Xiaolu warned Amin not to tell Xiaowen about this because he didn't want to add any more burdens to his ex-wife's heart. After returning home, the man told his mother that he wanted to drink the soup she made. After a flurry of activity by his mother, who hadn't cooked for years, she managed to make a bowl of soup for her son. But the man ate it with great relish and said that he hoped he could eat his mother's cooking every day in the future. The mother, who was unaware of the situation, said that she was very busy with work now and would learn to cook well after she retired. The man smiled. Maybe for him, this home was just a place to sleep. The worried doctor came to Xiaolu's home at night. He still advised Xiaolu to be hospitalized immediately for surgery. And their conversation was overheard by the mother-in-law who was hiding in the dark. She couldn't believe that such a would happen to her son. Then after sending someone to investigate, she found that her son had even reserved a burial plot, and it was right next to the tombstone of her grandson. The mother-in-law's emotions completely. She wailed and begged God not to take her son away. The once arrogant wealthy lady was completely broken at this moment. Throughout her son's life, she had given him too little company. Once, when her son begged her to spend more time with him, she had refused on the pretext of work. She had been so intent on running the company well that in the end, she had gained nothing. Looking at her son now, who could only use painkillers to suppress the pain in his body, the mother-in-law was filled with grief. Finally, the mother-in-law had no choice but to find Xiaowen again, begging her to come back and accompany her son. Because only in this way would her son have the motivation to continue living. Facing the mother-in-law's request, Xiaowen found it ridiculous. Because it was the mother-in-law who had forced her to write the guarantee letter in the first place. After hearing this, the mother-in-law immediately tore up the guarantee letter. Helplessly, in the end, Xiaowen still couldn't heed the mother-in-law's request. The next day, the mother-in-law directly called in the media reporters and publicly admitted that she was not a good mother-in-law. All the perfection before was just a facade she had put on. So her son's divorce was also secretly forced by her. She apologized to Xiaowen for all her past actions and announced that she was going to give up her career and accompany her son again. Then, the mother-in-law went to Xiaowen's home to apologize to everyone. There was no longer the haughty look on her face as before. She begged Xiaowen to come back to her son. But Xiaowen resolutely refused her. The old father beside her also advised his daughter not to be so heartless. At this time, the mother-in-law knelt down on both knees, claiming that as long as Xiaowen would to come back home, she could even sever her relationship with her son. Xiaolu, who had rushed over, quickly helped his mother up. Facing everyone's persuasion, Xiaowen's heart remained as firm as ever. She said that she was about to marry Amin soon, so she would never to remarry the man. The next day, Xiaowen's father suddenly found Xiaolu lying unconscious on the ground. In a hurry, he quickly sent the man to the hospital. Only then did he learn that his former son-in-law was terminally ill and didn't have much time left. The mother-in-law came to the hospital hoping to find a doctor who could treat her son's cancer. The hospital director said that there had indeed been an expert in this field before. But due to a car accident, his arm was seriously injured and he could no longer perform such precise surgeries. The mother-in-law then realized that the expert the director was talking about was Xiaowen's boyfriend, Amin. And it was the mother-in-law herself who had caused Amin's car accident. So the only chance for her son to survive had been ruined by her. The man only had half a month left to live. For the last time, he found his ex-wife and sincerely apologized to her for all the mistakes he had made in the first half of his life. Because he owed his ex-wife too much. Although Xiaowen's heart still couldn't forgive him, seeing the man she had loved deeply for so many years in such a pitiful state, she couldn't accept this reality either. As the illness grew worse, Xiaolu gradually began to experience short-term memory loss. On a rainy day, he held an umbrella and went to the school to pick up the children from school, but he had forgotten that their child had already died 5 years ago. Worried, Xiaowen quickly persuaded her ex-husband to go home. When the two of them walked hand in hand back home, the mother-in-law was overjoyed, mistakenly thinking that Xiaowen had to come back to take care of her son. Unexpectedly, Xiaolu asked his mother if his son had come back. The mother-in-law was shocked when she heard this. Xiaowen quickly explained that Xiaolu was having memory loss and claimed that during this period, she would come to take care of the man every day. And the mother-in-law still harbored the hope that Xiaowen would remarry her son. But she knew that the reason why Xiaowen had to come and take care of the man was completely out of sympathy for his situation. After all, the feelings between them could no longer be repaired. The next day, the mother found that her son had the idea of committing suicide. She quickly found Xiaowen, hoping that she could prevent her son from taking his own life. Finally, at the tombstone of their son, Xiaowen found her ex-husband. At this moment, Xiaowen could no longer control her emotions. She pleaded with the man not to give up on his life, even if it was for the sake of their deceased child, he should fight against the disease. Seeing his wife so sad for him, Xiaolu finally gave up the idea of committing suicide. Amin, in order not to let the woman he loved fall into pain, decided to help Xiaolu with the surgery. After more than 10 hours of unremitting efforts, the surgery was finally successful. But unfortunately, the disease had already spread extremely seriously. This surgery could only help Xiaolu extend his life for 2 months. In fact, Xiaolu had already come to terms with death. He asked Xiaowen to forgive his mother's mistakes. Because his father had died early, when he was young, there were always bad people coming to the door to demand debts. His mother, in order to protect him, faced dozens of people smashing and looting alone. As a result, his mother's personality had changed a lot since then. She worked hard every day just to prevent them from being bullied again. Xiaowen joked that Xiaolu might have an Oedipus complex. Xiaolu smiled and said that although his mother had many extreme behaviors, considering that he was about to atone for his sins, he still hoped that Xiaowen could forgive his mother. After returning home, Xiaolu sought his mother making clothes at home. He grabbed his mother's hand and said that he wanted to go on a trip with her. In the past, his mother was always busy and never had time to go. Now he wanted her to accompany him well. On the plane, Xiaolu endured the pain in his body and happily planned the travel route for their first trip with his mother. At this time, they realized that there were so many places they wanted to visit. But unfortunately, Xiaolu still couldn't fulfill his last wish. Exhausted, he directly fell on his mother's shoulder. The mother cried and said, "Hurry up and eat, son. You need to eat before you go to sleep."